Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, President Park Geun-hye will nominate a new Prime Minister as early as this Monday, triggering the start of a cabinet shake-up expected to involve several ministers. The Park administration plans to put top priority on boosting the economy following the Sewol-ho ferry disaster that is threatening to slow the recovery. Plus, Pakistan's busiest international airport comes under attack by heavily armed militants who killed more than 12 people. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Monday, June 9th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this lunchtime, with last week's local elections done and dusted now, President Park Geun-hye is expected to push ahead with her much anticipated reshuffle of the cabinet, but also her presidential office aides.
And a new prime minister nominee could be named as early as today as well. Kim Min-ji has the details.
President Park Geun-hye will likely announce her pick to fill the vacant prime minister's seat as early as this Monday. With the local elections out of the way, the president is expected to speed up the cabinet reshuffle in response to public criticism of the government's lax handling of April's ferry disaster. Sources say President Park has been searching for a candidate with an innovative mind and ethical integrity. This comes after our previous Prime Minister nominee An Dae-hee withdrew last month amid criticism over the amount of money he earned in the private sector after retiring as a Supreme Court justice.
국가 개혁의 적임자로 국민들께서 요구하고 있는 분을 찾고 있습니다.
The president has been mulling over potential candidates as she seeks to press ahead with her reform agenda. Among the candidates under consideration are Kim Young-nan, former head of the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission, as well as Cho Moo-jae, a former Supreme Court justice. With the ruling Saenuri Party failing to grab winning tickets from the Chungcheongdo provinces at the local elections, candidates from these provinces are also being considered, including Shim Dae-pyong, the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Local Autonomy Development. A reshuffle is also imminent at the presidential office. President Park on Sunday tapped Yoon Do-hyun as the new senior presidential press secretary after a close aide stepped down from the post as he's reportedly considering running in a by-election next month. Yoon, the head of YTN Plus, a digital contents provider, was noted by the presidential office for his balanced way of thinking and sharp analytical skills as a journalist.
Yoon was appointed as he's the right person to explain government reform policies to the public and receive their understanding and cooperation.
A review process is also underway for other presidential aides to be replaced. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
As the country slowly recovers from the recent Sewol-ho ferry disaster and now with the local elections over, the government says it's putting all its focus on spurring the economic recovery. Arirang News' Yoo Li-an has more.
이번이 마지막이라는 생각으로 어렵게 살려낸 경제 회복의 불씨를 더욱 크게 살리고 우리 경제의 재도약을 이끌어서 대한민국의 희망을 만들어 갈 것입니다.
President Park Geun-hye has put economic revitalization at the top of her agenda, and she's vowing to pour all efforts into carrying out her 3-year economic innovation plan announced back in February. The first part of the 3-part plan is public sector reform, which has been under the spotlight since April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster. A major step in the public sector reform is cutting debt levels at public organizations by tightening lax management. With the reforms in place, the debt-to-equity ratio was dropped to below 190% by 2017 from the current 220%. But since the government came under fire for mishandling the ferry disaster, the focus has shifted to rooting out corruption and cracking down on cronyism, or so-called parachute appointments. Minimizing government regulations is another major goal laid out by President Park. She had wanted to get rid of 1/5 of all government regulations by the end of her term in 2018. But some pundits say this goal will be hard to meet, given that the ferry disaster was blamed partly on a lack of safety-related regulations. Senior government officials say, however, that they will continue to take out unnecessary regulations. Finally, President Park has vowed to create an innovative economy. Helped by the government's drive to promote startups, the number of newly established businesses in the first quarter this year exceeded 20,000 for the first time in 14 years. The government is also looking to provide assistance to businesses in every stage of growth. Yoo Li-an, Arirang News.
The dust from last week's local elections has settled, but there's no time to rest for the nation's ruling Saenuri Party. Over the coming weeks, they will select a new party leader and prepare for by-elections in July. With the local elections ending in a virtual draw, next month's elections have taken on greater significance. Our correspondent Kim Young-gil tells us more.
With the campaigning over and the races decided, the ruling Saenuri Party now faces a slew of challenges ahead. The ruling party plans to establish a new committee to reform the government's overall management system in the wake of April's ferry disaster. It's believed the party may restructure itself to coincide with President Park Geun-hye's upcoming cabinet reshuffle. The Saenuri Party will also hold a party convention on July 14th to nominate a new leader. Saenuri Party heavyweights Kim Moo-sung and Seo Chung-won have announced their intentions to run, and both have pledged to give the party new life through reforms. The new party leader's first task will likely be rallying the troops ahead of July 30th by-elections. They are considered important as the number of National Assembly seats up for grabs could be as high as 18. 10 former lawmakers gave up their assembly badges to run in local elections, while 2 lawmakers lost seats for violating election laws. Another 8 more seats could be available as lawmakers are awaiting rulings on other charges. Political analysts say the outcome of the by-elections could serve as another barometer of public sentiment on the heels of the local elections. The ruling party currently holds 149 seats in parliament and needs just 1 more seat to resume its majority status at the 300-member National Assembly. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
It's been nearly 2 months since the Sewol-ho ferry capsized and then sunk off Korea's southwestern coast, taking with it more than 300 people. Round-the-clock search operations, which have encountered a number of setbacks in recent weeks, continue, and with more favourable conditions in the area since Sunday, 2 more bodies have been recovered. Kwon So-ah has the latest.
The number of missing is shrinking, and the number of confirmed dead is rising. With waters around Jindo Island in the southwest of the country at their calmest on Sunday, rescue divers recovered a male body at around 11:30 p.m. from the 4th floor of the sunken vessel. The government's disaster response headquarters is conducting DNA tests and fingerprint analysis to identify the body. A female victim was retrieved on the 3rd floor cafeteria of the ship Sunday morning. She was identified as the Danwon High School teacher who had stayed on the ship and saved 19 students. The government's disaster response headquarters has decided on a 3-step plan for recovery operations moving forward. Up until the 20th, divers will continue to search the cabins. After that date, remotely operated vehicles and sound navigation and ranging methods will be used for harder-to-reach locations. Additional equipment designed to ensure that bodies aren't carried out of the ship by currents is also expected to be installed. Meanwhile, the trial for the 15 crew members of the Sewolho ferry who were indicted last month for abandoning the passengers on board will begin on Tuesday in Gwangju District Court. 4 of them, including Captain Lee Jun-seok, are charged with homicide by willful negligence. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye will embark on a 6-day trip to Central Asia next week. The Presidential Office of Cheongwa says from June 16th, President Park will make a state visit to Uzbekistan to discuss the 2 sides' ongoing natural gas development and thermoelectric plant construction projects. From June 18th, President Park will make a state visit to Kazakhstan to discuss bilateral projects involving coal-fired thermal plants and petrochemical complexes. Visiting Turkmenistan for the first time as Korea's president, Park will seek ways for the governments on both sides to expand support for Korean businesses in the region. The presidential office adds the three countries are considered key partners of Korea in line with President Park's Eurasia initiative of linking energy and logistics infrastructure across the continent.
Foreign investors are snapping up more and more stocks on the Korean bourse, but they're flocking to one conglomerate in particular, Samsung Group. And all pointers suggest this trend will continue for the foreseeable future. Our Song Ji-sun tells us why.
Samsung Group is attracting foreign investors to the Korean bourse. Over the past 20 trading days, when Korean retail investors were sidelined, foreigners remained net buyers, pushing the benchmark Kospi index up by nearly 3%. Data released by the Korea Exchange on Monday shows a quarter of all shares bought by foreigners over the past month were those of Samsung Group companies. Foreigners now own more than 35% of all listed shares on the main bourse. Corporate analysts attribute the spiking Samsung share price to the group's improving profitability and the need for the children of Samsung Group patriarch Geunhye to continue speeding up the succession process. Analysts say the rise in Samsung shares accounted for a third of the 3% gain in the Korean market's capitalization in the past month. Samsung Electronics has been the main target of recent purchases by foreigners, who now control more than half of the company. The tech firm now accounts for 18% of the main bourse's total market cap. Foreigners kept buying Samsung shares since Samsung chairman Geunhye was hospitalized in May following a heart attack, on hopes the group's ongoing reorganization and transfer of the company's control to its three children could yield capital gains. In a move widely seen speeding up the succession, Samsung SDS and Samsung Everland recently announced plans for initial public offerings by next March. After their IPOs, Samsung Group affiliates could account for over 30% of the market capitalization of all listed companies. Experts say the bullish foreign buy will continue in the near future, given their preferences to invest in safer companies like Samsung, coupled with expectations Samsung will benefit from the U.S. economic recovery. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korean companies appear to be shying away from active investment amid lingering economic uncertainties. The Financial Supervisory Service said Monday that the current assets of listed manufacturers under the nation's 10 major conglomerates exceeded $245 billion as of the end of last year. That is up around $21 billion from a year earlier. The current assets of Samsung, Hyundai Motor, and Lotte Group rose, while those of LG and SK Group declined. A current asset is any asset that a company can convert into cash within 1 year.
Now, the income gap between male and female workers in Korea is the widest in the developed world. This according to a new report by Korea's National Assembly Research Service. OECD statistics on full-time employee wages in 2010 shows a gender income gap of 39% here in Korea. Japan, number 2 on the list, was way below at 29%. Hungary had the smallest income gap at less than 4%. The report advises the government to take legislative action to narrow the big income gap by offering more support to women who want to return to their careers after starting a family. Now, the Korean won has hit the highest level against the Chinese yuan in nearly 3 years. The Korean currency hovered around 163.2 won to the yuan in late Monday morning trading, and that's appreciated by nearly 10% since the beginning of February. The won's value is now the highest it's been against the yuan since July 2011. Korean exporters say they're worried about the strengthening won as it hurts their price competitiveness against their Chinese rivals at a time when their shipments to China are in fact slowing down. Korean exports to China fell by more than 9% to $11.3 billion in May from a year earlier, this according to Korea's Trade Ministry.
And in other news, at least a dozen North Korean escapees have been arrested in Thailand. Japanese media reports that 13 North Koreans who are thought to have been smuggled into Thailand were caught in the northern Chiang Rai region. Reports say the group, which includes 2 children, likely crossed into Thailand after passing through China and Laos with hopes of defecting. Thai media also reported that the would-be defectors are from the northeastern part of North Korea and traveled by boat from southern China before being caught in Thailand. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is speeding up efforts to get cabinet approval on the issue of collective self-defense, a reinterpretation of the constitution that will allow Japan to militarily assist allies that come under attack. Japanese daily Asahi Shimbun reported on Sunday that Abe has reportedly instructed senior officials to prepare for cabinet approval before the session ends on June 22nd. Following his orders, a senior ruling Liberal Democratic Party leader asked government officials to prepare a draft of the constitutional reinterpretation. Abe has also ordered his ruling party to quickly reach an agreement with New Komeito, its ruling coalition partner, which has been at odds with Abe over his push to revamp the country's defense policy. Time now for a look through the international headlines for following this hour. For that, we connect to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Yes, good afternoon to you, Eunice. Now, Pakistan's busiest airport was the scene of a deadly battle between security forces and armed militants on Sunday.
That's right. At least 20 people have been confirmed killed in that attack, which comes as Islamabad's talks with the Taliban have hit a snag. Here's Shin Se-min with the story.
A 5-hour assault on Pakistan's busiest airport has finally come to an end. At least 20 people were killed and more than a dozen others injured, many of them airport security personnel, after armed militants disguised as police carried out an assault on a terminal at Juna International Airport in Karachi on Sunday evening. The death toll includes at least 10 militants. A spokesman for Pakistan's Civil Aviation Authority says thousands of people, including airline staff, passengers, and members of the airport security force, were present at the airport when the terrorist attack began. Police and army officials also say at least 1 aircraft was destroyed in a gunfight that involved machine guns and a rocket launcher. There were also reports of at least 2 blasts at the airport. The terminal where the assault was carried out is not normally used for commercial flights, but instead of cargo and special VIP operations. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet, although it comes as peace talks with the Taliban and other militants have stumbled in the recent days. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And moving on to some other world news now, at the Vatican, a first. Pope Francis hosted the presidents of Israel and Palestine for a special prayer for peace in the region. The Sunday event came to fruition 2 weeks after the pontiff extended the invitation during his visit to the Holy Land and as U.S. brokered peace talks between the two sides had cooled. Pope Francis said peacemaking calls for courage, much more so than warfare, and called on leaders to say yes to encounter and no to conflict. Prayers were said in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths during the sunset event. The 3 leaders also planted an olive tree in a symbolic sign of peace. As national teams from around the world began arriving in Brazil for the 2014 World Cup, officials are struggling to control resident outrage that stands to threaten a smooth football event. Protests have ignited in almost every major city, packed with people angry at the estimated billions of dollars being poured into new stadiums and infrastructure in spite of desperate needs elsewhere. A subway worker strike has left São Paulo's transportation sector in chaos as police used tear gas to break up protesters last Friday. The 8-week event kicks off this coming Friday. And finally, local media in Thailand are reporting key red shirt activists have agreed to talks with the interim military government, marking progress in the first of the junta's three-stage plan for reconciliation. Meanwhile, the National Council for Peace and Order has lifted curfews at 4 additional tourist destinations in an apparent move to reboot tourism in Thailand. That's Cha'am, Hua Hin, Krabi, and Phang Nga, sites popular for their beaches. This follows last week's curfew removals in the resort cities of Pattaya, Samui, and Phuket. Bangkok and Chiang Mai, meanwhile, remain under orders to close down between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m., as is the case in non-tourism-related provinces.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11. Now to some very welcome sports news, because South Korean golfer Park Geun-hye has gotten herself back on the winning track by finishing first in the Manulife Financial LPGA Classic in Canada. It ends a 20-event tour winless streak that dates back now more than 11 months and comes just 1 week after Park Geun-hye's 59-week run at #1 in the world was unfortunately snapped. Park finished the tournament at a staggering 23 under par, besting Christy Kerr of the United States by 3 strokes. In the final round, Park shot a 10 under 61 with 10 birdies. And more exciting sports news, because the World Cup, I'm sure you know, kicks off in Brazil in just a few days' time, and Koreans are very well known around the world for their feverish support of their team. And although everything is ready for the games and people to enjoy, the festivities are likely to be toned down this year in wake of the recent Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Our Paulie has this report.
Here in the capital, Seoul, many sports retailers are unusually quiet despite the World Cup being just around the corner. Large advertisement banners and over-the-top promotional events have been absent from storefronts. It's part of a conscious choice by many football fans and businesses to tone down celebrations as the country continues to deal with the shock and grief from April's Sewol-ho ferry sinking.
The atmosphere was really great during the World Cup 4 years ago. But even with a few days left with the World Cup, there's no atmosphere of excitement. Many people don't feel like it's the World Cup.
Official corporate sponsors of the upcoming World Cup are also adjusting their marketing campaigns in Korea to reflect public sentiment. For example, many are using televised ads with gentler music and subdued visuals.
Given the recent national sentiment, we're proceeding with a calmer tone. Our TV advertisements are colorful and have a lively atmosphere. However, we're moving forward with a message that has a softer mood.
Major department store chains are also taking a different approach, with World Cup-themed fashion shows and cartoon exhibitions featuring famous South American artists.
As you know, there are many people who are suffering from the Sewolho disaster. Through this exhibition, we want to give people a chance to heal and support each other.
The opening match for the World Cup will kick off on June 12th, while Korea will face off against Russia in their first match on June 17th. But unlike in past years, the official supporters group, the Red Devils, won't be launching large-scale rallies through the streets of Seoul. Nonetheless, millions of fans at home and abroad will be cheering on the Korean men's national team, albeit with a heavy heart. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's hot again here in Seoul today. Temperatures will reach 29 degrees Celsius under mostly to partly sunny skies. And actually, the western parts of the nation will be hot, while the eastern regions will see cooler readings today, hovering in the mid to low 20s, and rain is forecast in parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do during the day. Well, we are in fact expecting on and off rain until the middle of the week due to atmosphere instability, and temperatures will drop as well, but remain in the seasonal averages, hovering below 30 degrees Celsius. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The highs in the capital and Gwangju will rise to 29, while Daegu tops out at 27, and Busan should climb to 24 later on. Now for other regions, down on Jeju should see a high of 24, and Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 29 and 19, while Mount Keungang tops out at 15. Well, that's all for me today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Jinju and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.